Hey everybody, how you doing? God bless you. Hey, listen, this video here, it's gonna be a little intense. There's some other things I could put in here in terms of some early Christian stuff, but I'm just gonna limit it to this. What we're gonna look at is, first we're gonna start out with probably the most vivid picture of what happens after someone dies from Jesus. And this is Luke chapter 16, starting in verse 19, where he talks about the rich man and Lazarus. So we're going to look at that first. And then what we're going to do is we're going to switch to two different writings. One comes from a Jew. He's not a Christian. From a Jew that would be late first century. I don't know. Could be somewhere around 70 AD. The other one we'll look at would be very similar, is from a Christian who was a third generation disciple from the Apostle John. His name is Hippolytus. So that would be somewhere around 220, something like that, 215, 225, something like that. So we're going to look at these writings. So let's get into some reading here. Luke chapter 16, verse 19. I'm just going to use the, I think this is the ESV. So we'll read it from the ESV. There was a rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. That reminds me where, Jesus referred to, he said those that wear purple and things of that kind of wealthy nature or whatever, live in palaces or whatever. Contrasting between the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. Foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to, lay his head. And of course he preached in Luke 6, blessed are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Woe to the rich, for they've already received their comfort. And blessed are those who hunger now, for they will be comforted. And woe to those who are well fed now, for they will, be hungry. Anyway, that's Luke chapter 6. And, he speaks that way. So anyway, let's get into it. So Luke 16, verse 19. There was a rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. And at his gate was laid a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who desired to be fed with what fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, even the dogs came and licked his sores. And the poor man died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's side. Now the rich man also died and was buried. And in Hades, now King James translated as hell. That's confusing because there's a distinction here between what is sometimes in the New Testament where Jesus talks about Gehenna, and sometimes he talks about Hades. And the early Christians talked about Hades is where the unrighteous go as soon as they die, and they're waiting until the resurrection for the final judgment and stuff. Whereas Gehenna is what we see in Matthew chapter 25, verse 31 to 46. Those last few verses, verse 43, 44, 45, 46, those last few, where it talks about the unrighteous that didn't do, that's like this man here. They didn't feed the poor, they didn't, give any drink to those that were thirsty. And, Jesus said, hey, I was hungry and thirsty, and, I was in prison, I was sick, you didn't come visit me, all these things. You didn't attend to my needs, you didn't help me at all. And they said, wow, Lord, when did we see you this way, or whatever. He said, when you ignored the least of my brothers. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he's saying. You did this to me. And then he cast them away, and the angels took them away and cast them into Gehenna and stuff or whatever. So let's see, let's keep reading. So verse 22, the poor man died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried, and in Hades, being in torment, he lifted up his eyes, and he saw Abraham far off and Lazarus at his side. So very soon I'm going to read a description from both the Jew, that is late 1st century, and the Christian, that's early 3rd century, that sound very similar to each other, about a description of what Hades looks like after we die. Okay, so I'll share that with you very soon. The rich man also died and was buried, and in Hades, being in torment, lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham far off and Lazarus at his side. And he called out, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus to dip the end of his finger in water. Now, before I keep reading, we're in verse 24 right now. Let me draw your attention again, as I've said on many videos. He's saying, have mercy on me. Now, in Greek, whenever you talk about almsgiving, as we translate in English, what gets lost is the word almsgiving doesn't sound anything like mercy, does it, right? When Jesus said, the measure of mercy you give will be measured back to you, it doesn't sound anything like almsgiving, does it? However, in Greek, it's the same root. So mercy and almsgiving share the same root. So really, it's, mercy generosity, it's mercy giving, it's mercy sharing, is really kind of a good translation for that. And so Jesus said, the measure of mercy you'll receive. So That's what Jesus said. The mercy you give will be measured back to you. He's talking about Judgment Day. So anyway, let's keep reading. Verse 24. And he called out, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus to dip this end of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in anguish in this flame. But Abraham said, Child, remember that you in your lifetime received your good things, and Lazarus in the like manner bad things is what he received. But now he's comforted here, and you're in anguish. Didn't that sound like what Jesus preached in Luke chapter 6? He said, Woe to those who are rich now, for they've received their comfort. Blessed are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Woe to those who are well fed now, for they will mourn and weep. Blessed are those, that's how he spoke. Woe to those who laugh now, for they will mourn and weep. And he said, Blessed are those who mourn and weep now, for they will be comforted. This is the way, you go back and look at Luke chapter 6, the way Jesus preaches, and then read this passage, or come back and listen to the video, whatever. But it's exactly what Jesus is preaching. Everybody ignores it. There's millions of people going to these country club churches week after week, and they're ignoring what the Bible says, all based on some twisted way of understanding what they think Paul is saying. And they're on the broad road that leads to destruction. So I hope you really take heed to what's being shared here. Anyway, let me continue. Verse 24. And he called out, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus to dip the end of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in anguish in this flame. But Abraham said, Child, remember that you in your lifetime received your good things, and Lazarus in a like manner received bad things. And now he is comforted here, and you're in anguish. And besides all this, between us and you is a great chasm that has been fixed. Obviously, it's a transparent, impassable sort of window there. And none may cross from there to us. And those who would pass from here to you are not able to, and none may cross from there to us, or from you to us. In verse 27, he said, Then I beg you, Father, to send him to my father's house, and I have 5 brothers, so that he may warn them, or else they may also come into this place of torment. And Abraham said, They have Moses and the prophets. Let them hear them. Because they preached a lot about helping the poor, and they just ignored it. And then they prophesied about the Messiah that would come and fix that problem among the true Christians. And if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent. And he said to them, If they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced if someone rise from the dead. So, if they didn't listen to Moses and the prophets when Jesus rose from the dead, they're still not going to hear the message of Jesus, because we got it printed. Ever since, 500 years now, we've had the printing press. Everybody has the privilege for the first time in 2,000 years to have personal copies of the Bible, and people don't read their Bibles. They don't pay attention to this stuff. So, only a few, like people would ask him, Lord, are only a few people going to be saved? That sure is what it seems like. I know I'm doing my part to try and wake people up. So let's go look at Matthew real quick, 25. And let me read the judgment real quick. Now I want you to hear what Jesus is saying here in this judgment. Okay? So starting in verse 31. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate the people one from another, as the shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right, and the goats on his left. And then the King, who is Jesus, the King will say to those on his right, Come, you are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for me from the foundation of the world. For you just believed. You didn't try to work, do any works, because if you did that, you were trying to earn your way to heaven, and you wouldn't be relying on me to save you. No, that's not what he said at all. Let's hear what he says. This is what Jesus said. This is the true gospel. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer. He's calling him righteous. Matthew chapter 6, it starts out, people pay attention to the one part of it, about the, showing off, doing good and stuff, and they ignore the message, what he's saying. He said, when you do your acts of righteousness, not if you do, when you do your acts of righteousness, then he starts describing almsgiving and stuff. So he's attributing righteousness to almsgiving. So that's what he's saying here. He's calling these people righteous. Just like 1 John chapter 3, verse 7 says, He that practices righteousness is righteous. Just like Acts chapter 10, Peter says in 34 and 35, God only accepts those that fear him and work righteousness. All right, let's continue. Verse 37, again, Matthew 25, verse 37. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, When did we see you hungry and feed you, and thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick and in prison and visit you? Then the king will answer them, truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these my brothers, you did it to me. Verse 41, then he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you cursed, in the eternal fire. Let that sink in. Depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire, prepare for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you would not welcome me. Naked, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, you did not visit me. Then they will answer, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or stranger or naked or sick and in prison, and did not minister to you? Then he will answer them, saying, truly I say to you, as you did not do it to the least of these, you did not do to me. In other words, those you did not do to the least of these, my brothers, did not do to me. And these will go away into eternal punishment. Uses the Greek word eternal. There's a lot of people out there trying to say the scriptures don't say that, the punishment is eternal. But that's what it says in the Greek. It's very clear, and this is not the only passage. Chapter 24 also uses it in Greek. But the righteous into eternal life. So they will go into eternal punishment, and the righteous into eternal life. Matthew chapter 13 talks about it as well, somewhere in mid-chapter and stuff. So anyway, let's get into, I'll start with Hippolytus, which again, he's the early Christian, early 3rd century, somewhere around 215, 220, this would be written. And then when we read the Jewish writing from Josephus, you'll see it's very similar. Okay, so it says here, this would be, if you want to look at Ante-Nicene Fathers, volume 5, and it's in the extant works and fragments of Hippolytus. So volume 5, the extant works. So in other words, he's got books 1 through 10, and then all of a sudden there's another section of it's called the extant works of fragments of Hippolytus. Part 2, dogmatical and historical, is basically what it is. And so this is a section that is the conclusion is wanting against Plato on the cause of the universe. Okay, let me continue. And this is the passage regarding demons. And now we must speak of Hades, in which the souls both of the righteous and unrighteous are detained. Let me see if I can zoom this up a little bit. Are detained. Hades is a place in the created system, rude, a locality beneath the earth, in which the light of the world does not shine. Now, if you haven't noticed, in Acts chapter 2, Peter says that's where Jesus' soul was for 3 days and 3 nights. His body was in the grave. He quotes from Psalm 16, talking about Jesus' soul would not be left in Hades. God would raise him from the dead, but that his body would not see decay in the grave. So his body in the grave is his soul in Hades. And Jesus himself said, just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth, or in the belly of the big fish, so the Son of Man would be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Other passages in the New Testament too. So let me continue. So it says, the locality beneath the earth is what Hades is, a place in the created system, in which the light of the world does not shine. And as the sun does not shine in this locality, there must necessarily be perpetual darkness there. This locality has been destined to be, as it were, a guardhouse for souls, at which the angels are stationed as guards, distributing according to each one's deeds for temporal punishments, for different characters. And in this locality there is a certain place set apart by itself, a lake of unquenchable fire, into which we suppose no one has ever yet, he's talking about Gehenna, has been cast. For it is prepared against the day, or for the day determined by God, in which one sentence of righteous judgment shall be justly applied to all people. And the unrighteous, and those who believed not God, in other words, they didn't believe God, what he said in the word, they didn't believe it, who have honored as God the vain works of their hands, idols fashioned by themselves, shall be sentenced to the endless punishment. But the righteous shall obtain the incorruptible and unfading kingdom of God, who indeed are at present detained in Hades, but not in the same place with the unrighteous. For to this the locality there is one descent going down, one drop down, at the gate whereof we believe an archangel is stationed with a host. And when those who are conducted by the angels appointed unto the souls have passed through this gate, They do not proceed do not proceed on one and the same way, but the righteous being conducted in the light towards the right side, and being hymned, singing hymns by the angels, or singing hymns, stationed at the place, are brought to a locality full of light, and there the righteous from the beginning dwell, from the very beginning of time, and went all the way back to Adam and Eve, dwell, not ruled by necessity, but enjoying always the contemplation of the blessings which are in their view, and delighting themselves with the expectation of others ever new, and deeming those ever better than these. And that place brings no toils to them, and there is neither fierce heat, nor cold, nor thorn, but the face of the fathers, in other words the patriarchs, and the righteous are seen to be always smiling, as they wait for the rest and eternal revival in heaven, which succeed this location. And we call it by the name of Abraham's bosom. But the unrighteous are dragged toward the left side by the angels, who are ministers of punishment, and they go on their own accord no longer, but are dragged by force as prisoners by the angels. And the angels appointed over them send them along, or kind of shoo them along, reproaching them and threatening them with an eye of terror, forcing them down into the lower parts. And when they are brought there, those appointed to that service drag them on to the confines of Hades, and those who are, or the confines of hell, it says. And those who are so near hear incessantly the agitations of that lake of fire, and feel the hot smoke. And when that vision is so near, as they see the terrible and excessively glowing spectacle of the fire, they shudder in horror at the expectation of the future judgment, where people will be cast there, as if they were already feeling the power of their punishment. And again, where they see the place of the patriarchs and the righteous, they are also punished there, for a deep and vast abyss is set there in the midst, so in other words in between them, so that neither can any of the righteous in sympathy think to pass it, in other words cross over to rescue them, nor any of the unrighteous dare to cross it either. Thus far then on the subject of Hades, in which the souls of all who are detained until the time which God has determined, and then he will accomplish a resurrection of all people, and not by transferring souls into different bodies, but by raising the bodies themselves that belong to those souls for judgment. And if you, O Greeks, you refuse credit to this because ye see these bodies in their dissolution, learn not to be incredulous. Anyway, I'll just stop there. Let me pause this. I'm going to switch over and get the book on Josephus. You'll see that the parallel to what Hippolytus is saying on behalf of the Christians in the early 3rd century is virtually the same thing Josephus is saying around 70, maybe 65, 75 AD, something like that. Alright, so this is actually there's two different translations that I've seen. This book Josephus, the works of Josephus, Flavius Josephus. This is one translation by William Whiston, and there's another one out there. I forget what the gentleman's name is, but this is the one I'm going to be reading from. So this would be, if you get this book, this is page 813, and it's towards the end. There's a little bit left towards the end there, you can see, but it's right after the section Flavius Josephus against Apion. So this is an extract out of Josephus' discourse to the Greeks concerning Hades. Okay, it says, now as to Hades, wherein the souls of the righteous and the unrighteous are detained, as it is necessary to speak of. Hades is a place in the world not regularly finished, a subterranean region wherein the light of the world does not shine. From such circumstance that in the region the light does not shine, it cannot be but that there must be in it a perpetual darkness. The region is allotted as a place of custody of souls, in which angels are appointed as guardians to them, who distribute to them temporary punishments agreeable to everyone's behavior and manner. In this region there is a certain place set apart as a lake of unquenchable fire, whereunto we suppose no other hath hitherto been cast. But it is prepared for a day aforedetermined by God, in which one righteous sentence shall deservedly be passed upon all men, when the unjust or the unrighteous, means the same thing in Greek, unjust or unrighteous, and those that have been disobedient to God, and have given honor to such idols as have been the vain operation of the hands of men, as to God himself, shall be adjudged to this everlasting punishment, as having been cause of defilement, while the just shall obtain as an incorruptible and never-fading kingdom. These are now indeed confined in Hades, but not in the same place wherein the unrighteous are confined. For there is one descent into this region, at whose gate we believe that there stands an archangel with a host, and which gate, when those pass through which are conducted down by the angels appointed over souls, they do not go the same way, but the righteous are guided, or the just are guided to the right hand side, and are led with hymns and sung by the angels appointed over that place into a region of light, in which the just have dwelt from the beginning of the world, not constrained by necessity, but ever enjoying the prospect of good things they see, and rejoice in the expectation of those new enjoyments which will be peculiar to every one of them, and esteeming those things beyond what we have here, with whom there is no place of toil, no burning heat, no piercing cold, nor any other briars there, but the countenance of the patriarchs, or the fathers, and of the righteous, or the just, which they see always smiles upon them, upon their faces, while they wait for that rest and eternal new life in heaven, which is to succeed this region, the place we call the bosom of Abraham. But as to the unrighteous, or the unjust, they are dragged by force to the left-hand side by the angels, allotted for punishment, no longer going with goodwill, but as prisoners driven by violence, to whom are sent the angels appointed over them to reproach them and threaten them with these terrible looks, and to thrust them still downwards. And now those angels that are set over these souls drag them into the neighborhood of Gehenna, or hell, the lake of fire itself, who, when they are hard by it, and continually hear the noise of the agitation of it, and do not stand clear of the hot vapor itself, but when they have a nearer view of this spectacle, as of terrible and exceeding great prospect of fire, they are struck with a fearful expectation of future judgment, and in effect punished thereby. And not only so, but where they see the place or choir of the fathers and of the just, even hereby are they punished. For a chaos deep and large is fixed beneath them, inasmuch just as a man, or a just man, that hath compassion upon them, cannot be admitted to pass over, nor can one that is unrighteous, if he were bold enough to attempt it, to pass over to the side with the righteous. There is a discourse concerning Hades. This is a discourse concerning Hades, wherein the souls of all men are confined until a proper season, which God hath determined, when he will make a resurrection of all people, of all men, from the dead, not procuring a transmigration of souls from one body into a new body, but rather again those very bodies which they lived on when they were on earth, which you Greeks seem to be dissolved. Do not believe their resurrection, but learn not to disbelieve it. For while you believe that the soul is created, and yet is made immortal by God, accordingly to the doctrine of Plato, and this in time, but not incredulous, but believe that God is able, when he hath raised to life that body which was made as a compound of the same elements, to make it immortal. Anyway, I'll just stop there. I don't know if you noticed or not, despite the fact it's just two different individuals translating the Greek, because the works of Josephus and Philo in the early 1st century, both being Jews, and to our knowledge never becoming Christians, they wrote them in New Testament Greek. We call it Koine Greek. Koine means like common. So it's the common peasant class language of Greek that the people spoke. So here's these two Jews writing in this Koine Greek, not to mention Christianity and stuff. It makes it really indicative that, just as historical documents show, the whole ancient world spoke that. That doesn't mean there weren't regional languages and stuff or whatever. Just like in Rome, people high up in, the government or whatever spoke, Latin, which is the Roman language. But Latin didn't take shape until hundreds of years later, until it started to become the common language. And the shift occurred from Koine Greek to all of a sudden the common language being Latin and stuff. So, but at this time, everybody speaks Greek. But anyway, so I don't know if you noticed or not, but the writings, despite the fact they were translated by two different individuals, they're saying the same thing. I mean, Hippolytus is echoing the words of the late 1st century Jew. So obviously the Jews and the Christians are all believing the same thing. And ultimately, a couple centuries later in the future, from the time of Hippolytus, not Josephus, but Hippolytus, a few centuries later, eventually that evolved into Purgatory. after Augustine, maybe during Augustine's time, which would be 5th century, but off in the distant future, post-Nicene and beyond, that's when it changed into purgatory. It wasn't in the early church, as Catholics try to say that it is. So anyway, I hope this helps you. I hope this, God bless you. And I just encourage you to take this to heart. Take it very seriously, because the people that aren't working righteousness in this life, and they're just kind of sitting on the Jesus bus stop or whatever, and they're not pleasing God, and they're not really trying to purge all sin and purify themselves and doing good to all men and fulfilling the law of actually loving your neighbor as yourself and practicing what Jesus taught, which perfects us and teaches us to learn how to love our neighbor as ourselves. So the law of Moses will never perfectly make you perfect. That's what the book of Hebrews says. Because if so, then Christ didn't need to come. That's what the book of Hebrews says. But Jesus' teachings bring people to perfection. I mean, Moses just said, for instance, don't kill somebody, right? Don't kill your brother. Don't commit adultery. But Jesus says that's not sufficient. Stop committing lust in the heart. That's committing adultery. Don't even be angry with your brother. If you do, go reconcile with him. And if you don't forgive him, then your Father will reinstate your debt of unforgiveness and stuff or whatever. Moses never talked that way or whatever. So Jesus' teachings bring people down to the core, the essence of the law and stuff, to perfect them and stuff. Let it take your heart, just grip your heart and stuff. Fear the Lord, Acts 10:34 and 35. God only accepts those that fear God and work righteousness. Why should we fear God? Because the coming judgment. And as the Proverbs say, that a person that fears God, he flees from evil. Right? A person that is so motivated by the love and gratitude what Jesus did on the cross makes them flee evil. The two, like a vice, squeeze that person onto the narrow way. Okay, God bless you.